And I am also currently serving as President of the National Education Union, so I shall be chairing this evening, and we have some absolutely excellent speakers on the call this evening. But I'd just like to start with a few words of introduction around why this is so important and why we're talking about this as the National Education Union. So currently, 3.9 million children in the UK, or 8 out of every class of 30, are growing up trapped in poverty. This means that millions of children are going hungry every single day. And I see the effects of that and the impact of that in my classroom. Children come to school hungry, they're not able to learn, they're not able to concentrate, they're worried and anxious and stressed about where they're going to get their next meal from. All of the evidence points to the facts that poverty has a profound effect on students' attainment and on educational outcomes. And also poverty and deprivation are linked to higher levels of childhood obesity, which is a problem which is just getting worse and worse and worse. We have a situation at the moment where restrictive eligibility and complicated registration procedures, as well as the stigma that's built into a means testing system, it can't keep up with the number of families that are being pushed into poverty this winter. And children and families are missing out on the vital support that they deserve, such as free school meals. So that's why we, as the National Education Union, have launched our campaign for free school meals for all children in primary school. I believe, and we as a union believe, that every child should have a hot meal every day, that it should be reliable, that it should be nutritious, and that would help the children to focus on their learning, and their attainment would improve. But there are many, many, many more benefits, which I'm sure some of our speakers will speak about as we go through the call. But we really want to say that no child should be left behind. So today we're going to hear from a range of speakers about the national campaign for extending free school meal eligibility. And we're also going to hear about some of the work that individual local authorities are already doing to support children in their local areas. And I hope that you will be able to support our campaign for free school meals, and that you will take the model motion back to your council that we've prepared for councils to show their support. So the first speaker I'm really pleased to introduce this evening, we've got Kim Johnson MP. Kim first entered Parliament at the end of the 2019 general election as MP for Liverpool Riverside. My family tell me she's a fabulous MP there in Liverpool. And in April 2020, she was also appointed as Parliamentary Private Secretary to Angela Rayner in her role as Shadow First Secretary of State. And Kim also currently sits on the Education Select Committee. Kim has been busy coordinating the campaign in Parliament for free school meals for all. And earlier this term, she held an event in Parliament to launch the campaign. So I'm really, really pleased to invite Kim to speak to us this evening. Thanks for joining us, Kim.
Oh, thank you so much, Louise, and hello to everybody on the webinar this evening, and thanks for giving up your time. And I just wanted to say solidarity to NEU at the moment who are currently balloting, and we will know that so many unions and so many across the public sector are balloting for better pay terms and conditions. You know, 12 years of austerity has taken its toll on our country and our public sector workers. So it's one thing for the government to stand and clap on a Thursday, but another about, you know, providing decent wages and terms and conditions going forward, because as we all know, everything has gone up, you know, apart from wages. You know, everybody has had a real terms wage cut at the moment. And so the rollout for me of universal free school meals is critical. But I would have to say, we should not be having this discussion. You know, we are the 5th, some say 6th richest country in the world. You know, and we should not be reliant on food banks, as Louise has just pointed out. You know, national statistics, 8 in a class of 30 are living in poverty. In my Liverpool Riverside constituency, that we have 11 out of 30 children, because we have some of the most deprived wards in the country in Liverpool Riverside. And it is a sad state of affairs that we have a Tory government who does not recognise or listen to what's being said by the NEU in their No Child Left Behind campaign. And it's really important that all of the campaigns that are taking place at the moment, because I was at through the foundation event this afternoon. It was, you know, an extremely vibrant event with representatives from across the sectors, and it's about coordinating, you know, all of these campaigns at the moment, because we have notable chefs like Tom Kerridge and Jamie Oliver who are campaigning for universal free school meals. And at the event that I held, that Louise has mentioned, at the beginning of September, you know, for me, rolling out universal free school meals should not be about the funding, it should not be about the finance, it's about investment in our children and our young people, because at the end of the day, these are the wealth providers for the future. And it's staggering, you know, in a country that is the 5th richest country, more and more Victorian diseases, you know, our children are, you know, being diagnosed with rickets, with scarlet fever, with malnutrition, diabetes. And so investing in children's health and well-being is a way of countering any future demands on the National Health Service in the future, because they are the wealth providers. And as Louise has pointed out, children can't learn when their stomachs are empty. And we know that children are going to school pretending to eating rubbers. And you know, some of the stories that we've had recounted to us from teachers is heartbreaking. You know, and not only are children not being fed, those parents who aren't eligible, because the threshold at this moment in time to access free school meals, £7,400. You know, it's ridiculous, because we know there are parents on universal credit. We know that there are parents working 2 jobs who have to be reliant on universal credit and then have to be reliant on food banks to fill their children, aren't eligible for free school meals. It is, I think it's a disgrace that this government are not looking at this. You know, they commissioned Henry Dimbleby to draft the food strategy, and one of the key recommendations that Henry Dimbleby was pushing was universal free school meals for all those on universal credit. And I think that all children, you know, in primary and secondary school should be eligible, you know, for free school meals. And people talk about, well, you know, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be costly, but I think having to take the time and the bureaucratic process in determining who is and who isn't is a pain for schools, but it's also about taking away that stigma from children, because at the event that I held, there were young people who were talking about their own personal testimonies about what it was like for them when they were younger, and accessing free school meals, having to stand in separate queues. And they said they felt like that they had a badge on them that said, you know, I'm poor. So it takes away all of those things. But we know that the last 12 years, and particularly the last 3 years in terms of COVID, there has been a significant widening in the education attainment gap. And that gap is even wider and when we talk about regional variations as well between North and South. And there's been a really useful report that's been published not so long ago by the Northern Health Alliance, talk about those disparities and talk about the impact on children's lives because of that, particularly around mental health. But, you know, in terms of the campaign at the moment and what we can do in terms of moving things forward, as mentioned, there are a number of organisations that have been campaigning very strongly in terms of the universal rollout. And for me, SAP at the moment, our front bench, you know, are talking about the rollout of breakfast clubs. And while that helps, it does not go far enough. And I think Gillian Keegan, Tory Secretary of State for Education, I think, you know, in terms of the campaign and in terms of what councillors do on top of the motion, is to write also to Bridget Phillipson, who is the Shadow Secretary Minister for Education, but also to Gillian Keegan as the new Secretary of State for Education. Gillian is from Liverpool. She worked through the education system. She did an apprenticeship, and I would hope that she has a level of understanding and a certain empathy about what children are facing at the moment. You know, because we know that the numbers of children throughout this cost of living crisis are going to grow. You know, there's an estimated 4 million children living in poverty. I think there's nearly 200,000, get all my figures mixed up, that could be but aren't eligible because of universal credit. And I think in terms of where we are at the moment, we know that we've had 12 years of austerity, and we are approaching austerity 2.0. And I know how difficult it was for my local authority, and I know councillors on this call would have struggled in terms of having to make some really, really difficult decisions. In Liverpool, for example, 63% of our central grant funding was cut. We've already lost £450 million in cuts, and we've got to make another 73 million. And I personally do not know where that 73 million comes from, because people talk about being cut to the bone. We've got no bones, we've got no limbs left, we're on life support, you know, and there are going to be, you know, serious impacts in terms of cuts on our most disadvantaged children. We've already talked about, you know, HAT funding being reduced, so that's going to be an impact on those children during school holidays. But I think in terms of what we can do, and sadly as a Labour MP, I'm in, you know, not in a strong position because the Tories have an 80-seat majority and they are pushing through some really horrendous policies at the moment. But we have to fight back, you know, and in terms of using the model motions, the LP motions, but also in terms of contacting directly Gillian Keegan and Bridget Phillipson. And I'm speaking at young people at this event this afternoon, and they've got a petition at the moment and 100,000 signatures of that petition. So I suggested that maybe they print that petition off and young people present that petition in person to the Prime Minister on the doorstep of Downing Street, because as we know, Rishi and his family will not be suffering in the next coming months. You know, their children aren't going to go hungry. You know, so it's looking at what we can all do together in terms of trying to instigate change. And we know how much a public response can have in terms of getting this government to do a U-turn. You know, Marcus Rashford shamed them into a U-turn, and I think that's what we need to do now. And I think sadly, what we're also experiencing in terms of school meals at the moment, because schools outsource to companies, and because of the cost of living, you know, the £2.70 or the £2.40 that it costs or that schools get for meals is not going far enough, you know, in terms of being able to provide a nutritional meal on the amount that's being allocated is going to be very difficult. And we know that amount has only increased by 7 pence in the last 12 years. It's atrocious, you know, because this government are not focusing on the needs of our communities. They're focusing on the needs of their donors and the 1%. And what we want is, you know, for the many and not the few. So if you can use those model CLP motions and contact those two people I've mentioned, that would be really great. So power to you all, you know, and I know that you're in a very difficult position in terms of the cut. So thank you, Louise, and thank you everybody on the call for listening. Take care.
Thank you very much, Kim, and some clear asks there for people that are on the call there. Thank you to people that put in some messages in the chat. It's good to see what people are talking about. Just to direct you as well, if you've got any specific questions, if we do get time at the end, as I say, we've got some really great speakers. If we do have a bit of time at the end, we will take a couple of questions. So if you want to pop any specific questions for any of our speakers into the Q&A function. So I've got the next speaker to introduce. I'm really pleased to have Amelia Collins Patel, MBE. Amelia is a youth ambassador ambassador for the End Child Poverty Coalition and campaigning to tackle child poverty. She was awarded the MBE for her work during the pandemic to support young people in need, particularly affected by loneliness and isolation during the lockdown. So it's really a pleasure to have you with us this evening, Amelia. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle. I'm not a politician. I'm not at all really involved in anything government or anything like that. But actually, I'm a young person who's experienced poverty, but not necessarily how most young people do. I wasn't born into poverty. I didn't experience poverty for most of my life. But for a really short period, my dad had an accident at work. And although I come from a household with my mum and my dad both working, and my dad had an accident, it meant that our income dropped to a point where actually me and my sister both ended up on free school meals for a short period. And the weird thing was, we didn't get told as a family. And even before that, me and my sister were never really people who had the proper hot meal with a cake and a drink of choice, because actually it's very expensive. But for me, it was, I went to go and buy something and I realized I didn't think I'd got money on my card. It was like, oh, I'll try anyway. I'll see if I can pay. And the dinner lady said to me, she was like, oh, you got free school meals. You can get like a hot meal. And I was like, what? And it didn't last long for this whole excitement of getting a hot meal and a drink. But actually during that time, it really helped my family out. Because we weren't in a financial situation where we could afford to pay for me and my sister to both have these really nice meals through school. And I think it's a really interesting one. I know we talk a lot about kind of this £7,400 cutoff. And I think actually one thing with my story in particular is there's loads and loads of families who aren't necessarily on universal credit, who potentially have two working parents, but actually are just on that line of actually they don't qualify for universal credit, they don't qualify for any support, but actually their children aren't necessarily getting a great meal. They're not necessarily getting food that will fill them up for the whole day. They potentially get home from school and are really hungry. I remember often getting home from school and the first thing I did was make a slice of toast. First thing I did, because I was like, actually, I've just spent most of my day and have literally had like a cold sandwich and water because it's free. And actually, it's a really difficult situation for so many young people, not just primary schools, but actually secondary school as well. And I think it's really weird. I was at the same event earlier on as Kim, and it was amazing to hear so many people talking about, actually we've been campaigning about this for over 20 years. I am not yet 25, but actually that means we've been campaigning about this for most of my lifetime, and we are still yet to see all primary school age get a hot meal. We're yet to see kind of actually England catch up. We're yet to see kind of children not have to get to the end of the day absolutely starving, and the first thing they do is buy a bag of chips because it's dirt cheap, or stick the toaster on and put some bread in the toaster. And I think with that, it's also thinking about kind of like the long-term impact. For me and a lot of the other ambassadors for End Child Poverty, it's actually a lot about like the mental health side of it as well. It's not just about the kind of short term, oh yeah, you're an adult, you can kind of ensure that you eat well and have the different amount of food, but actually like that long-term mental health impact that has on actually probably more of society than we actually realise. There's actually probably a lot of adults, potentially some of you guys listening, who actually have experienced free school meals and potentially are living like with that kind of worry of, oh my gosh, where's my next meal coming from? Have I actually got enough money to buy staples? I was really shocked yesterday. I went to do my food shop and it's the first time in a while I've had to buy baked beans. And it's the one thing I'm adamant I must stick to the named brand. And I was shocked when for 6 tins, it cost me £4. And actually for a lot of like families out there, that is a very staple part of a meal. Children grow up living off baked beans as part of a diet. And actually we're at a point where more needs to be done, not just to support the children, but to support the families, to support the teachers, that are struggling, seeing children go hungry, but also to help more children like me growing up who kind of then can actually aspire to not just be hungry all the time. And one thing in my local area that I've just moved to a new area, and one thing for me that I've been seeing, and actually it's a really simple thing to implement, is a local charity basically goes around and they collect surplus food, and for £3 you get 3 bags of food. That covers things such as frozen/cold, covered staples, and fresh fruit and veg. That's for £3. And the thing is, actually, for so many people, that is a lifeline. And actually, we need to consider not just the whole free school meals thing, but actually how do we support more people within our local communities, and just continue kind of supporting people to get out of poverty.
Thank you, Amelia. I absolutely agree. That was a brilliant contribution. Thanks ever so much, Amelia. So next, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Julie Reid, who is a councillor for Gorton and Abbey Hayward in Manchester City Council. She's also chair of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee, and Julie has also been a teacher for over 26 years, teaching in secondary schools and sixth form colleges, and presently part-time in further education. So it's lovely to have you here this evening. Thanks, Julie.
Hello, I can't see myself, so I don't know what I look like. I can only see a black screen. So.
I can see a lovely picture of you, Julie,
right,
but
okay.
I can't see you in person, but we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so I don't want to repeat what's already been said by other people, and obviously I agree with everything that's already been said about what Kim's, as what's happened in Liverpool. We've got the same issues in Manchester of children in schools, being seen eating rubbers and because they're so hungry, and it's absolutely devastating to think about what they're actually experiencing. And I'll read from what I'm supposed to read, and then I'll add to it. So because I know that I said I would do that. So basically, we speak about the extent of child poverty now. It's got drastically worse in the last few years. So ultimately, over the last 12 years since we've had a Conservative government, but I've experienced the previous 18 years of Thatcher government, where those who know will know that every time it's a Conservative government, people get poorer, and you end up with child poverty getting worse and worse and worse. So this is not the first time. I'm hoping that now we've voted for PR, it will be the last time. Once Labour do get back in government, we won't have a Conservative government that basically runs for this many years. So basically, what's happened is we made a commitment. I remember Gordon Brown making that commitment of getting rid of child poverty altogether by 2020, which obviously is 2 years ago now. And what's basically happened is the opposite's happened. So it's gone into reverse. So where we were making huge progress with Sure Start, with free breakfast clubs, with wraparound care in schools, our Sure Start centres, we were doing so much good work. And then all of that's been undone in the last 12 years, which is absolutely devastating. And that target, obviously set by the Labour government, has been eliminated. They've got rid of the target altogether. Let's be honest about it. And there's been a downward trajectory ever since. So anyone who works in schools has seen how children are coming into school hungry. The introduction of universal credit, which was done, let's have it right, on purpose to make sure that people didn't get paid weekly. They got paid every 5 weeks. The rent didn't get paid directly. And it means that they've got to suffer, so they've run out of money towards the latter end of the month. And I've seen that in my ward, basically really, really difficult. It's getting more and more difficult with the advent of inflation and the cost of living crisis with gas and electric. So we're having to top people's electric and gas up, really, really having to take people's food parcels. I mean, we had to do this during COVID anyway, but people who were sheltering, but this has just got extended so that we're now using money that was supposed to be used for activities that were to enhance, if you like, people's communities. We're now saving all that money for food because I will not take a risk. Things like we're not put bonfire nights on, we're not putting the Christmas light switch on. We're basically saving all that money so that we can give it to people. We saved £8 million for the pot where we can help people out because we know how difficult it's going to be. So, I mean, rent is rising. We've got a gentrification. The same thing's probably happening in every major city. So that social housing's there's not enough of it. You've got people living in bed and breakfasts. I've got loads of homeless families in bed and breakfasts waiting for social housing when there's just not enough social housing. And so they're in private landlord houses, which is basically takes the majority of what they get. And most people on universal credit are working, and they're just basically working 2 and 3 jobs, and they just cannot cope because they can't pay the rent and feed the kids and keep the gas and electric on. It's just not possible. We're ending up in Dickensian times, and it makes my blood boil that you've got people like Liz Truss coming out with a 45p tax rate, and making it the rich richer and the poor poorer. It beggars belief that people voted Brexit for me. I can't get my head round why people would have done that, but I will be political because I'm a politician. So what are we doing in Manchester? In Manchester, our own Marcus Rashford, lovely Withenshaw lad, basically, fought for free school meals, went to Boris Johnson, wouldn't give up, and basically managed to get some leeway in there. And what we've done is we've basically kept on giving free school meals to people who are eligible. Obviously, got the issues with people who are not. Right the way through the holidays, and then the last time it was the half funding, which had to be connected to the holiday activities as well, which is a problem for some people. They don't always want activities as well, but that was how it was connected. So we've managed to find the money, but I've now got my committee tomorrow. It's our scrutiny week, and on that committee is the budget. And on the budget, we know we're going to have a big hole where we will not be able to fund all the things that we've been able to fund. And at the moment, we've reserved this 8 million to one side. But how long that's going to last, we don't know. And we don't know what this Rishi Sunak and co are going to come up with on the 17th of November. We know it's going to be a cuts budget. We know that they're going to make the poor suffer even more than they're already suffering. And we just cannot accept this any longer. We've got to fight. We need to say no more. And we just had the boundary constituency changes that have come out today, and we're going to have a general election within the next year or so. But it's not quick enough. We've got a winter to go through. We've got children who are suffering. We've got families that are suffering, and we need to do something about it. Yeah, of course, what Kim said, plead with the Conservatives. I don't trust the Conservatives, but at the end of the day, I go along with what she said. Go to Bridget Phillipson. Go to your own local authority and ask them what they're doing. We're doing the best that we can for our families. We're trying to protect our families. But at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to really change things is a Labour government. So I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Some really important points you've covered there. Thank you. So we've got 2 more speakers for us this evening, but I would just like to say I can see a few people in the chat have had to leave or can't stay till the end of the call, and we have got some really excellent speakers left. And if you do want to get the recording of this session, it will be available both on our Twitter and on our Facebook pages after the session today. So the next speaker that I have, I'm really pleased to introduce Munira Wilson MP. She's been MP for Twickenham again since 2019 and currently Liberal Democrat education spokesman, having previously been the party's health spokesman, so an expert on this subject that we're going to discuss. She's also been a school governor at a junior school in her constituency, and I'm really grateful that she signed the open letter calling for the expansion for free school meals and has helped us campaign on that call as well. So thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for that introduction. I'm not sure I'd term myself an expert, but free school meals and this issue is a cause that's very close to my heart, and it's something that the Liberal Democrats actually have been championing for a long time. When we were in the coalition government, it was the Lib Dems who pushed very, very hard for free school meals to be made available to all infant pupils. And that was something I know, talking to colleagues, they had to fight very, very hard for. And there was a lot of opposition from the Tories to do that. So I'm really pleased that we managed to do that. Since then, we have continued to advocate for extension of free school meals to all primary children, which is, I know, the NEU ask. And certainly in this cost of living crisis, even if there is a feeling that we can't do it on a permanent basis. I think it should at least be looked at as an interim solution, that all the data and the evidence is out there to back up the improved educational performance, but also mental and physical well-being, and obviously the nutritional benefits of making sure that every child has at least one decent hot meal every day. So the more recently, I have been really strongly pushing for the extension of free school meals to everybody on universal credit. Frankly, I think it's atrocious. It's a nonsense that you can be on universal credit and you're not eligible to free school meals. And there is this ridiculous cliff edge, which is at such a low level that as soon as you're earning over £7,400 after tax, but before benefits, you lose all your free school meals. And universal credit was created in order to ensure those cliff edges don't happen and not to disincentivize work and so on. But it's a huge barrier, that cliff. And we know that 800,000 children living in relative poverty are not currently qualifying for free school meals. I think Kim laid out the Henry Dimbleby proposals to the government in terms of the food strategy. I have repeatedly pressed for them to follow Henry Dimbleby's proposals. He advocated extending free school meals to all of those on universal credit, and when he realised that that was perhaps going a step too far and there wouldn't be support for that, he's even put forward an alternative, less generous proposal of extending it to those raising the threshold from £7,400 to £20,000 per year. So we continue to press for that. When the schools bill was still alive, before we had all the further political turmoil and change of prime ministers, and whilst there are lots of other issues in the schools bill that I'm sure we could all discuss and say we perhaps disagreed with, one of the things that Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords did do was put an amendment down on this issue to ensure that every child on UC would get access to a free school meal. Sadly, it was voted down by the Conservatives. Unfortunately, Labour abstained on the issue, so we weren't able to win it. And it looks as if the schools bill won't be coming back to the House of Commons. Otherwise, I was planning to push it again. Like others have said, I was at the event this afternoon, of the Food for the Future event, which was amazing. It was great to see so many high-profile people there. I was part of a cross-party panel with a Conservative peer and another Labour MP, Stephen Timms, promoting the case for free school meals. What we're talking about is we need people out there in the country to mobilise and be flooding their MPs' inboxes saying this has to happen. There are too many people out there, too many children going hungry, not able to learn and thrive. And ultimately, as Kim made the point very, very strongly, and I repeatedly make this, we have to see this as an investment in our children's future. If they can learn well and thrive well and succeed, that is as important for their own, obviously, personal well-being and society as a whole, but also for our economy in the long term. I wanted to briefly give a shout out to council, because it's a call mainly of councillors. I want to really thank councils up and down the country, because I know that many where government funding has failed to come have stepped up and provided free school meals, for instance, in the school holidays. Now, I know there is government funding for some school holidays now. We've got Marcus Rashford in England to thank for that campaign, because the government were pretty slow during the pandemic. I was really pleased that Kirsty Williams, who was then the Lib Dem Education Minister in Wales, led the charge in the pandemic for making sure that there were free school meals available to all children in the school holidays through the pandemic as well. But I know, for example, my own borough, like Richmond, they're not funded in half terms, but October half term just gone, there were vouchers given to all children eligible for free school meals to be able to access lunches. And I know that's happening in many councils across the country. I also want to thank those councils, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's either Tower Hamlets or Newham and another council that have already stepped up and extended free school meals to all those in primary schools, which is brilliant. I know other councils are looking at it, but council budgets have been cut to the bone, and you are having to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I'm so pleased that you've prioritised children because they are so important. But I know that, for instance, some councils are taking money out of their public health budgets to have to fund this intervention. You should be getting that money for central government. And we will continue to campaign hard to make sure that the government does look at this. We've heard talk about, obviously, there's the autumn statement coming next week. Sadly, we're expecting all sorts of cuts. I hope and pray that the education budget and indeed local councils' budgets are not attacked, but I think nothing is going to be immune. But I do get, my sense is, particularly from today's event earlier on today, and just some of the things, some of the mood music that's around, I think there are some Tory MPs who are supportive of the wider move, particularly towards extending to those on universal credit. And I hope that they are putting pressure on the government behind the scenes, and that might result in action. I don't know if that will bear any fruit, but that's why I think it's so important that people keep campaigning and mobilising to put pressure on their local MPs. So I will continue to fight the good fight for free school meals, because children are our future and we must invest in them. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much. We really appreciate your fight in that, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. Thanks ever so much. So I've now got the final speaker for this evening, and I'm really pleased to introduce Councillor Maggie Browning. Maggie is a secondary school teacher and is also convener of our Councillors Network at NEU. Maggie is also currently a councillor in Southwark, one of the 4 London boroughs who have already implemented free school meals for all children in primary schools. So I'm really pleased and excited to listen to what's been happening in your council. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Louise. Thanks so much for having me. So as Louise said, I'm Maggie. I'm a councillor in Southwark, and I'm a teacher in Battersea, and one of the conveners of the NEU Councillors Network. And it's just been great to be on this call and have so many amazing speakers from different political parties and backgrounds, and so many councillors attending as well. So I'm going to talk a bit about our work in Southwark, and also what councillors can do in their own local authorities to take this really important, vital work forward. So in Southwark, we've actually had universal free school meals for primary school children since 2010. And we have managed to maintain and protect that policy as one of our manifesto commitments on several manifestos over the last 12 years, despite continued rounds of austerity and really dreadful, horrendous funding cuts from central government. We've also actually had free school meals for nursery children since 2019. And so we're really proud of our free school meal policies because we know how vital having a nutritious hot meal every day is for children, for their growth and for their development. So the situation, hasn't been great over the last 12 years, but it's now just worse than ever. And so many families in Southwark are facing absolutely dire circumstances. So in Southwark during the pandemic, food bank use went up 4-fold in sort of one go over a period of months. That was really, really devastating and really, really difficult for the communities and the families affected. And that is now getting worse. I think it's sort of slightly improved again as the pandemic obviously came out of it, but with the current cost of living crisis, it's now reaching new extremes. So we have really fantastic food banks and community fridges in the borough who we work really closely with. And they are telling us that now they have families who are asking for food parcels where they don't need to heat any of the food items because they cannot afford the energy, like the kettle, even to boil the kettle or to use the microwave or to use the hob or to use the cooker. So our community fridges and food banks are trying to support families who are asking for food parcels where they don't need to use any energy at all. So that's what people in our borough and across the country are dealing with. So that people are living in such circumstances in a wealthy country like ours is shameful. It is absolutely shameful. And the government who has created the policies that led to the situation that we are now in should be ashamed. And we should all be saying that really clearly, no matter our political background. We know that it is local authorities and it is schools who are the frontline public services that will be protecting children through this crisis and who are living in poverty. So during the pandemic, it was local authorities like mine and schools like the ones I work in who were delivering food parcels, throughout the pandemic, who were making sure children had food in the school holidays before the government decided to U-turn and step up in the end. It was local authorities who were making sure that food vouchers were getting distributed in collaboration with schools. So it was councils and schools who were on the front line protecting families, protecting children, and that'll be the same this time. And that's what all of us on this call feel so passionately about. And our role will be to be a really loud voice as we support families through this dreadful crisis of cost of living, which is getting worse and worse, and really putting pressure on the government to step up and deal with the absolutely outrageous levels of child poverty that we are seeing. So I know that we'll all feel really galvanised by this call, that we've heard some brilliant speakers, that the NEU's campaign, as ever, obviously I'm biased as an NEU member, is fantastic and is getting so much traction because it really kind of speaks to people and people know how necessary this campaign is. So, I really want to encourage you to do whatever you can to take it forward. We've got a model motion which calls on the government to implement universal free school meals for primary school children as our key ask. So please look at that on the NEU Councillors Network part of the NEU page, I believe it is, and take it to your next full council. The NEU Council Network is a cross-party network. We've been around for a couple of years, probably more like 4 years now, actually, and we've always had cross-party support. We've had councillors taking full council motions that get, unanimous support in kind of mixed political makeups in their local authorities. We really want this to be the same. We want it to be like a really, really clear message that it's just unacceptable, the current situation, and that serious action needs to be taken. Also, please do encourage your council colleagues to join the NEU Councillors Network. So it's really active. It's got lots and lots of members. It's cross-party. It's got lots of resources that the network shares with members. So I'd really encourage you to join if you haven't already. And unless we are really loud about this, unless we're united and clear, we will just get ignored. So that's what we really need to take away from this and just make it, that there's no ifs, no buts, that we have to take action on child poverty and do this main ask of free school meals to get through this next winter.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Maggie. And you've gone through some of the key asks there for this call. So thank you for going through those. So yeah, sign our open letter if you haven't already. As previous speakers have already mentioned as well, write to your MP, speak to your MP if you're in a position to do so. As Maggie said, please take the model motion to your council. I believe it's been popped in the chat as well, so you can access it from there as well as from our Councillors Network website. If you are not already a member, join up. If you are already a member, get a colleague to join our network and you will get regular updates from us. And as I mentioned earlier, tonight's Zoom is available now, I believe, on Twitter and Facebook, on the Councillors Network Twitter and Facebook. So you can go back and see any of our speakers again from there. But I would also ask and encourage you to share that as well, because as Maggie said, the more voices, the louder that we can be about this, the more chance we have of creating this change that we know that children and young people desperately need. So I just want to finish this evening by saying thank you very much to all of the speakers that we've had on the call. All been absolutely brilliant this evening. I think you'll all agree. I want to say a huge thank you to the tech team behind the scenes who have been muting and unmuting and bringing people in as usual. And a particular thank you to our British Sign Language interpreters, Tebs and Nikki. And I will just finish by saying thank you to everybody who has joined us on the call this evening. Take care, go away, take those actions, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.